Take two. Welcome to the JALTCALL podcast. I'm your host for the day, Geoff Carr, and I'm joined today by Brian Gallagher of Meiji University in Nagoya. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Geoff. How you doing?
Doing all right, man. Doing all right. Looking forward today to talking with you about applied AI for teachers and learners as we start another academic year here in Japan. I know that everybody is really concerned and really interested in how we can use these new tools that seem to be exploding everywhere in the classroom.
Yeah,
What do you think?
AI's a big thing. So of course that was it was a theme for the JALTCALL conference last year, and if anything, it's bubbling and boiling. So I think it's still going to be a hot topic this year. For the PAN SIG, I noticed there's quite a lot of call presenters, and AI is popping up outside of call as well. So I guess it's what was the word that we used for ubiquitous uh,
Ubiquitous,
in
absolutely.
in learning. So yeah, it's all over the place. Yeah.
AI is so everywhere now that it's nigh unto quotidian, my good man. There we go. But anyway, talking about how we can apply it in the classroom here, right? Um, how are you looking to integrate AI into your courses, with all the new stuff that's happening here in 2025?
Right. So at my university, we're using AI for some of the writing courses. We pushed back on the first semester of first year because we want to focus on just basic typing skills and fundamentals. But it's probably going to work its way in with the lower classes. It will work its way in probably in the second semester, but maybe more advanced level students in that first semester, it might pop up with different teachers. But definitely from the second year and onwards, it's going to be part of the review process that students are going to be okayed, they are approved
Mm.
to use it. How about yourself?
Well, um, there are fewer applications of AI in my university. Some of the teachers have begun to teach kids how to use it in seminars, various applications, creating images, doing some review of writing, honestly, more often for research than review at this point. Um, One thing that a lot of teachers who are technically challenged or just not really accustomed to the AI tools yet seem to be having problems with is instructing the students in uh, good ways, effective ways. I say good ways is far too broad an expression there, to use AI in a way that is supportive of learning and helping them with the task at hand, but that doesn't defeat the purpose of a lot of these educational tasks, which are sometimes meant to be hard, right? How do we square that particular circle right there, having students use these fantastically powerful tools without, you know, weakening their own learning experience?
Well, I don't think it's not an easy question. It's not an easy question. There's going to be a lot of what we call jiggery pokery to get ourselves into position and out of position and get ourselves reset at intervals in order to try and get the benefits that we want to get without it becoming a terrific monster.
That
Uh,
sounds right on. And let me clarify, jiggery pokery is actually a Scottish dance, right? That we're looking at right
I
there.
jiggery pokery. It might be a Scottish term, but I guess there's it just means there's a lot of maybe fine tuning is a word that maybe other
Mm.
people would kind of use. There's a
So
lots
fine
of
tuning our own education in this case, our own
yeah
approach to it.
there's lots of things
Yep.
to move and to change. Yeah,
Mm.
movers and shakers. So I think for me for AI that I would like to think that I'm kind of like new to the scene, even though AI has been around for like a number of years now. Um, Even just when I think I'm getting used to doing it, like there's some other AI, and they're coming really fast and thick, and it makes it a bit overwhelming. So I mean, I'm a kind of I use computers a lot. So I guess for a lot of teachers, there's maybe a lot of fear about it. So today I want to try and give a couple of suggestions to the listeners of things that they can do, even if they're not so what's to say, veteran with Ewing. I don't think you can have a veteran. The AI's not been
Mm.
around that long to be a veteran. Yeah, but
Well, certainly not these LLM based GPTs. They aren't though. But you mentioned all this new stuff coming on and teachers having a difficult time trying to figure out what to use and what not. Um, I'd like to give our listeners a couple of examples of some tools that are available right now for them. Um, One would be some kind of a fine tuned and refined system that's already set up to accomplish a specific task. And on March 31st of this year, the AI SIG for Eurocall and JALTCALL had a collaborative online event, which was incredibly well attended. We had over 70 people come, and our first presentation. I can really talk. Our first presentation was Judy Wang and John Guyed talking about a project which they have, the AIAWE, the AI Automated Writing Evaluation Project, which aims to use AI for automated evaluation of a specific kind of writing, argumentative writing. And what they did with fine tuning their model to be able to give specific feedback that was trained and fine tuned on TOEFL IBT uh, texts, that was extremely impressive. And that the AI AWE is actually available for students to try now. Now, they'd need some training because it's really only supposed to be used for a very narrow kind of writing, argumentative writing. It's also available for teachers, and we'll have that link in our show notes today. Another thing that a lot of teachers are doing themselves, though, Brian, and I think that we've talked about doing this too, is using narrowly focused chatbots that they train themselves. The output's designed to walk through students through a specific learning process instead of just giving them a bunch of answers like using the AIs like Google. I've created a couple of chatbots which I use in my journaling program, right? And one is just the help me improve my diary writing Chatty. And what I did with this is I created a chatbot that was designed with these very specific characteristics. That was the students would put in and post a short journal entry, and the chatbot is designed to give them two short, specific, actionable items of feedback for them to work on that. Not be overwhelming. It's pegged to the CEFR level of the writing that the students input, and it just gives them enough to go back and work on it themselves. I think this is a really effective way to use some of these tools that we have, and I hope people will enjoy that and maybe try to make some of their own.
so the chat bot, so
Mhm.
that's dialogue based. It's not people are actually doing it with microphone, right? It's text input, text output.
This is a text input, text output design because, well, you and I both know that a lot of students who are working on their English writing maybe have some difficulty with pronunciation, especially if they're not as fluent as others would be, right? And so speech input and that kind of transcription is an absolutely great tool, but asking students to have pronunciation good enough to accurately transcribe a diary text that might be 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs long is a pretty tall order for some students. And getting lots of errors is going to be very discouraging to them, right?
Right. And so I guess I've heard people mention before about uh, bias in the what was it called, bias in the data or bias in the programming, that like some specific pronunciation or accent like is maybe favored. There's not a lot of Scottish data, for example. There might not be. uh,
Well, nobody wants to listen to Scots, so I would imagine that no. But joking aside, in that case, I think you're right. And when it comes to students who've been taught American English versus Australian versus Canadian in the voice input, yeah, you're spot on, I think, in that some people will have more accurate voice recognition and transcription than others, which is why the chatbots that I've made so far for my students have been focused on writing
Right.
because it's a little bit harder to screw up text, and also most of the chatbots have been trained on so much text from the internet that they're extremely good at interpreting meaning even when there are errors in the
Mm.
text with the student's input.
Right.
They're able to give great feedback on
Right,
that.
right. Even my youngest daughter, for her Christmas, she got an Amazon Dot, I think it was, which is like the smaller version of an Amazon Echo.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so she maybe her speaking, her English speaking, has lots of errors in it. But she can still talk enough, and the thing can understand plenty enough that she can get out it. Play the music that I want, and this is the song, and it helps her actually work on her pronunciation. Like trying to say things like dynamite, dynamite, dynamite,
Oh,
or
that's great.
dyna. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a quite a good thing for her. Do you think that students are going to be using voice commands on their phone for AI? Because I think a lot of students work on their phone. I'm just wondering, like, if other people think that students are going to start just, just like an Alexa kind of thing, like that.
That's a really good question, Brian. And I think that at this point, most of the AI models that I've seen and worked with that are using voice aren't very good at dealing with multiple languages yet.
Mm,
And that may not sound like it's answering your question, but for language students in particular,
mm,
don't you think that a lot of them might be more comfortable giving instructions or asking certain questions in their native language and then getting feedback in a kind of translanguaging which comes in their target language?
mm,
I think that students interacting based on commands and that sort of thing, ideally, sure, we'd love them to do it all in their target language. But a lot of students interact with their phones in their own native language and it
mm,
works pretty well.
mm, mm,
And if we're able to enable these models to work with students and being able to interpret what's supposed to be in Japanese versus what's supposed to be in English or Italian or Chinese or whatever the target language is, that's going to mean that these AIs can provide absolutely fantastic scaffolding.
mm.
And if they remember who the student is, it's going to be remembered and it'll be customized to the student over time.
Yeah, tailored.
It sounds kind of like a dream to me as a language teacher.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I just started classes last week there, and one of the first things I said to the students is, put in a photo for your avatar, get your ID all sorted out, and make sure your Google is set to English. How do I do that? And trying to get them kind of
Hmm.
preset. I told the students, when you're in class or when you're at university, you're in my department anyway. You're in the English world, so just put everything in English and try and see how you go on. And if you
Hmm.
struggle, go back to the native language. It's okay to switch, but
Mm.
do your best to live in that world.
Well, I totally get that. And as an immersive experience, I think at times that is absolutely the way to go. But doing it 100%, I'm pretty sure that by now we've begun to understand that CLIL courses are really most effective when
Mm,
you have an instructor who's able to scaffold the students in their native language when necessary and is able to translanguage enough
yep.
to walk particularly lower level students through stuff to help them understand the concepts better, right?
Trans language. I mean, trans language is a great phrase. I went to Hawaii. I think it was two Januaries ago. I went to Hilo, and the main speaker there was talking about trans languaging, and people were saying, "Is
Mm,
that the same as code switching?" And they're saying like, "No, it's a more it's it's similar, but it it's more kind of fluid or natural, or like for really kind of naturally bilingual kind of like children, or for people that have lived in a country for a long time. It's
Hmm.
oh, deja vu. Oh, hang on, like you just slipped in
Yeah,
that other bit of language, is de rigueur, like for the day.
it is. And I mean, as much as I miss out on a lot of things that people who teach at institutions in larger cities in Japan are able to experience all the time, me being in a small place like Asaikawa has meant that I need to basically exist in Japanese through most of my working day
Mm.
outside of the classroom, right? I am on committees, I chair committees, I work with staff, all that every day, all in Japanese. And as a result, over almost 30 years now, I've become capable of doing that. And I think it's made me a lot better instructor. I've just had to do that being here.
Sounds good. I'm still at
Hmm.
the back end. I'm still at the back end, struggling to do what I can do. Right,
Well,
we should move
keep at
on.
it, man.
We should move on
Hmm.
to a bit of application. So, uh, if I can take the wheel,
Go ahead.
for applying AI in the classroom, so I think I've got a few ideas that would be useful for a couple of people, that maybe we can.
All right. What are some things that we can ask students to do with AI in the classroom?
Okay, so I'm going to rock up with four kind of ideas. The first one is asking students to critique the AI's output. So I did this years ago, where it was just like Google Translate. So here's a bit of English, put it in Japanese, then go from Japanese back into English, like, and say, like, how mangled is it? I mean, the one we used to use before was Babelfish, and it really mangled the language. It
Oh
was
man,
Yahoo, I think.
Babelfish.
Um,
Hmm.
but so that's one thing you can do, is like put it in, put it out, and see like what the input output is like, how close it is. Second thing, having students compare the results of different Gen AI tools. So mostly
Hmm.
using, I think students just think OpenAI or
Hmm.
ChatGPT is that, and they say, well, actually there's quite a few now, which is why I told my place, like when we're writing the guidance from generative AI, don't call it ChatGPT, because by the time you've written it, it'll be onto something else. Like, because there'll be
Exactly.
such a glut of them. So that's maybe something you can do. Probably just like a one-to-one comparison. Maybe even if you're using a
Mm.
compare and contrast essay, like saying like, well, like this is it's a good topic to do, and they could put in like kind of some kind of good examples. Okay, third one.
Brian, can I ask you before you go on to number three? Do you ever have students do a bit of discussion, whether in English or Japanese, on a comparison like that of Gen AI tools or other comparative exercises?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I teach 5 writing courses, one, two, three, four, five, and in one of the writing courses, there's specifically compare and contrast essay, and so that's going to be what I'm going to do this semester. When I'm teaching that cause and effect, I also teach
Mm.
brainstorming techniques. So of course, the most famous one is the two circle Venn, like where you're talking about
Right.
compare and like the outside of the contrast. And if students are actually kind of quite high level, I usually put a square around those two circles of the Venn, and so we can even do a bit of neither this nor that, so you can get a bit more
Hmm.
kind of language structures out of it. But yeah, it's a good topic. It's a good way of introducing it. Another,
Outstanding.
I think you have to introduce these things a couple of times. There's not just one iteration. Like you need to have multiple,
Mm.
like bites at it to really kind of get it.
That's a good point. What
Right,
about
okay.
number three,
Number
which I
three, number
interrupted you
three.
on?
Right. Okay. So using AI as a study buddy. Louise, who you interviewed back in January, she
Hmm.
showed me probably more than a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago, where she had an online character that she was having. Like it was like her. I think she called it her digital girlfriend. That she called it, where she was
Yeah.
just chatting. Like all the time
Hmm.
with this, and like her eyes were so lit up, with this, and she was desperate to to show it, and it looked as if like it
Mm.
was a wee little genie in the bottle. There was a lot there, but so using AI as a study buddy. So I want to give a prompt, because a lot of people talking about prompt engineering, and so the prompt is everything now. So example prompt, you can write, "I'm having a bit of a hard time with concepts related to discussion skills. Right? Please test me at Cepher level B1 on the following: so opinion, evaluation, discovery, and mediation. I'd like you to ask me 3 questions in succession, wait for my answer on each, and then assess my answer. Do not give me the answer even if I ask. Instead, if I'm struggling or get the wrong answer, please give me a hint. Start now with the first question." And that's end of prompt.
Mm.
So that's quite a mouthful, but I think it's really critical. For me, every time with the prompt, I'm always putting in Cepher level whatever, because I
Hmm.
want it to be exactly right for that group of students, whatever the expectation that they're supposed to be, at least is at
Right.
the minimum. And I think that if you give it like more specifics, you just end up getting a much better output.
Absolutely. Yeah, you give the GPT really specific instructions on how to categorize exactly what its activities are, and you laid out the order and the content of what it is that you want right there. This prompt sounds like something that you or that is intended to be used in voice interaction with the AI, not necessarily written, because you ask it to wait for my answer on each.
Right.
Sounds like
So
that.
the
Is
whole
that what's
yeah.
designed
So the whole
for?
idea is that there'll be this is the student working with the AI. So they're kind of
Hmm.
autonomous. They're given the prompt, and then they're supposed to put in their input, and then that's them. That's kind of like, what do we call it? A breakout room, that the student has a breakout with the computer, and then they just try to go down bit by bit by bit by bit. I don't know how
Hmm.
long that you could run that for. It's probably something that you really need to kind of like try out and see how it runs with your students, and how far they can get,
Hmm.
how quickly the wheels can come off the bus, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing with a prompt like this, you ended it in such a way that the AI would be expecting this to be a, single iteration right there of the interaction. But if you were to add either to the prompt or maybe to some custom instructions for the AI, that each successive interaction should also follow a similar pattern, kind of give it some options, on where to take it next, what the next step of the interaction is.
Mm.
Then you could probably go into quite a long interaction with the AI here, and some would be very successful with continuing that. It'd be really interesting
So I
and
think
cool.
a word that it comes up in a lot of stuff here is talking about play. And so I think there has to be that,
Mm,
that opportunity to play with it first. And I think that's what we should do, that we should not dive in and start putting rules and regulations on it too quick before we really even kind of like know what we're doing. So that's something that I think it is really important. I went to a presentation one time where they were talking about, how language is built. And of course, the first section is just paraphrasing, or not paraphrasing, repeating like a bird. And then, like the level seems to be quite good. But then after that, people
hmm
play with the language. They're trying to do different combinations. And somehow the level then apparently seems to go down, even although
mm,
uh, you, you know more. And it's because you're
right.
taking risks, like, which is a good thing.
Well, exactly, because it's a lot more just intellectually intensive to actually remix concepts and rules and rematch them to create some different expression than it is to mimic something where someone else has already done the mental work of putting it together and arranging it the way it should be, right?
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. So I think there should be a lot of playtime. You get a lot. The
Hmm.
Animal Kingdom doesn't have homework. They do everything through play. So maybe we should do a bit more play. Okay. Last thing that probably I've been
Number
doing
four.
for kind of like longer than anything else is using AI to create quizzes, like low stake quizzes. So to do formative quizzes,
Mhm.
and then like if that's going well, then you can make it into a summative if you fancy it. So for example, create a 10 question quiz at Cepher level B1 for this content, and then enter the content and then let it go. So I guess loads of people are making worksheets and all that kind of stuff. So I think that creating the quiz, if you're new to the scene for doing AI stuff, I think that's probably one of the better ones for people to go with.
Mm. I could definitely see that right there. I have used AI quite a bit myself in creating questions for different kinds of interactions with students on uh, oral exams, especially. I take a bunch of information and a bunch of background material that I have myself for a course, and I put that into the AI knowledge base that it can draw on, right? And then do just what you're saying here. Okay, give me maybe not 10 question quiz, but give me 10 different questions, and then I have students choose one or two of those. We do that in some kind of oral exam. It's been extremely effective. Usually go back and forth with AI a bit. These are all really great ideas, man. Thanks. Those are four really excellent possibilities for application of AI in the classroom. Brian, thank you. And now we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back with section 2 of our podcast today, in which we'll be discussing some things which are currently happening in global education or things that we've noticed on the scene that educators might find interesting. Back in a few minutes. All right, welcome back to section 2 of our podcast tonight, where Brian Gallagher and I, Geoff Carr, that is me, will be discussing some items from global education news around the world and some other stuff which we've noticed that we hope would be of interest. All right, Brian, you want to take it away because you have a headline item here on France.
Yeah, so France is tightening up its ban on mobile phones in middle schools. So I know some other countries, Australia, were banning it as well in different schools. My child is in middle school and she's quite addicted to her smartphone. But yeah, in France, that's it. They're gonna have the ban on the phones in middle schools at least,
Mm,
protecting the children.
I think that's an incredibly smart idea. Really, I really do. Um, Kids should not be on mobile phones in school as much as possible. I mean, maybe there are some emergency situations. I know in Japan there's been some discussion about how they might be useful during disasters, earthquakes, tsunami, and that sort of thing. But by and large, I think not having them on in the classroom is the right approach. Yeah, how do you feel about
Yeah,
it?
well, kids in school, they get the Giga project, right? So
Mm,
from elementary school, actually my second daughter just graduated from elementary school. She's now started in the middle school this month. So she had to return her iPad, which she was really becoming quite proficient in. But she get told that at the new school she's gonna get another iPad. So
hmm.
iPad's just a big phone, isn't it? Yeah, it's the
Well, it
same
is.
thing.
How much freedom do students have in the Giga project when it comes to installing apps which are not part of the school system on there?
It's quite tightly controlled. I think username and passwords for installs are controlled by the teachers. Students are not allowed
Mm,
to install stuff that doesn't conform to school policy or whatever. So they're basically just they're
okay.
locked out,
And
as far
has
as I
your
know.
daughter jailbroken her iPad yet?
Yeah, no, she's not. She's not at that level yet. Yeah.
No. Well, I'm sure she'll get there pretty soon with you as your dad. All right. Following up on the phone project when it comes to France and that, uh, I sometimes listen to Cal Newport's Deep Questions podcast, and just recently He's done a short series on the impacts of social media and smartphones. The three episodes that I would recommend for people who are interested in this kind of stuff would be 345, which is entitled Are We Getting Dumber? Where there's a discussion about human peak intelligence and whether or not smartphones, social media, and other things which are much discussed in education these days are a part of that question. The next episode, 346, Getting Smarter in a Dumb World, with strategies for resisting the trend that was discussed before. And then 347, The Forgotten Phone Harms, whereas we so often discuss the primary harms of smartphone use, what this phone does to us directly, but we ignore the secondary harms, which can often be what the phone takes the place of, all the time it takes
Mm.
up, all the interactions that it takes up. These were extremely interesting to me. Um, I like a lot of what Newport has talked about here. There's some great topics in there. The podcast can have a lot of advertising in it, 2 to 3 minute blocks, so be prepared to skip if you're interested in this. But I don't know, Brian, have you read any of Cal Newport's books?
So I've not. I know he's a computer scientist, right? And
Yes,
I know he's written sort of New York Times kind of best selling.
he's had
I'm not,
several on that. Yeah.
yeah, but no, it's something that maybe we can look at. So human peak intelligence strategies for resisting the trend, and what was the third one? Primary.
Primary versus secondary harms of smartphones and social media.
Right. So, yeah, definitely worth a listen. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
out all day today. I listened to pretty much a whole day of podcasts. It was rare for
Hmm.
me to get a chance to have a quiet day to myself. So I had a book and I had, maybe I went through like 6 or 7 different episodes of things. But I'll put them onto my list.
Okay.
They sound good.
Excellent. I hope you like them.
So he's in New York. So I've seen also in there's a focus on academic freedom in the US. There's a lot of concerns about protection, how it supports universities facing challenge. I guess there's maybe some AI getting involved with entering into entering into universities or
The academic freedom challenges that I think have made it into my mind most recently have been those that the current administration in the US seems to be pushing on universities with threats to their funding status,
yeah
that sort of thing.
yeah.
As far as what's going on with AI, the the most interesting AI story that I've heard that involves universities lately has been the university student in Seattle, wasn't it,
Hmm.
who came up with a transparent AI overlay that you could use on your computer that would be invisible to the technology company that you were interviewing with on the other side. And I apologize, I cannot recall this kid's name, but he came up with a system which allowed people essentially to get AI assistance on the really incredibly difficult coding questions, which he maintains have nothing to do with actually being a really good coder, but allowed them
Mm.
to cheat their way through with AI assistance and so get job offers without the technology companies being any the wiser. Apparently, he embarrassed quite a few companies, and he was about to be blacklisted by his university. I don't know how that came out. And then suddenly, a lot of those same companies started contacting him and asking him if they wanted to work for them. So it looks like the kid did pretty
We
well out
get a
of this.
job. We get a job.
Exactly. You know.
I'm trying to think. Can you remember there was like back in the day there was a movie, I think it was called War Games, where it was all about the nuclear codes and
Mm,
there was like the whole movie and I was actually thinking, oh no, it's that um, the the war has started, the nukes are on their way, and it was just
kids
some
save the
computer
world. Yeah.
some
Hmm.
computer geek. I said it, like either you go to jail or have a job getting paid millions for the FBI or the
Hmm.
CIA or something like that. Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, I guess when it comes down to doing something like this that embarrasses people or gets some bad publicity, well, basically there is no such thing as bad publicity, right? You just get your name out
Right.
there.
In the media, you've got education week. So they've been reporting about district leaders tending to craft their own training for AI. They had an article that said that the leaders interviewed by RAN, they preferred crafting their own trainings rather than relying on outside experts. Which I guess most universities in Japan, we have not professional development, not PD, it's
Mm.
FD,
Hmm.
faculty development, um, which kind of, I think it's kind of like taking away from the teachers and a bit, like calling it faculty development, like instead of professional development. But the kind of like the do it yourself kind of like approach. It can be good,
Mm.
but it can also be the blind leading the blind kind of thing.
It sounds like one of those things where to understand uh, what the merits of this would be, you really need to know a lot more about the context, because I get that people need to experiment themselves, and learning yourself can be one of the most powerful teaching uh, modes available. But on the other hand, people who are able to specialize in some narrow field can often teach you things that you'd never have the time to learn yourself because you're too busy with all the other aspects of
Mm.
your job. So it sounds like there's a balance to be reached here somewhere. I'm not sure what it
So
is.
I think in America there's quite a lot of schools, quite a lot of districts when they're buying their computers. They get a deal with a computer company. Like it used to be like you get a deal with IBM where they would lease you like 1,100 computers or
Mm,
something. I guess now Google Chromebooks like feature a lot, and because they're far cheaper than
hmm
iPads. So when districts are making a spend in the states, you're thinking, right, what's the best deal that we can get? Like how many can we get for like equivalent
hmm
money? And so they maybe kind of go in
And
for it
so the Google
a bit
Classroom
more
system
than
comes in as part and parcel of that purchase. Exactly. Yeah,
right. So I
that's
think
it.
in schools in Japan, I think I found like Fujitsu is one company that puts in a lot of kind of like support to
Hmm.
universities, i.e., please buy our system, and like we'll put on lots of bells and whistles. Um, it's just their way of like trying to hold on to it. And if you're not really kind of like sure about it, if you're like a Jim Kyoku dude that's not really sure about the educational part of it, you think like, oh, I think I got a great deal, and then suddenly you find that everybody's using like one system. Like some of
Hmm.
the like web class and Blackboard, like and all these other kind of LMSs, like some are really just the big companies leaning on, given a deal,
Yeah.
but
Well, that can be a tremendous issue, can it? Because um, have you heard the podcast, or I believe it may be in a series of articles now that's entitled "Sold a Story," Brian, about the
sold a story.
"Sold a Story" is um, it was a podcast and also, I believe, an article series which discussed the development over time in the U.S. of using whole word reading versus phonics when it came to teaching children how to read from a young age. And it turned
Mm.
out there were a lot of integrated systems that had a great deal uh, invested in having students work on coding and guessing things by using text that had pictures that would allow the students to try to interpret what a word was and guess at it, remember it as a whole word, instead of teaching students to decode using phonic instruction. Phonics instruction was a little bit too basic and it wasn't usually integrated in these systems. There was also a very prominent educator from Australia, I believe, who brought in a system which she believed in passionately and taught and was adopted quite widely across the US. And it seems like it impacted things quite negatively.
Is that similar to VOA, the voice of America, or is that totally
No,
different?
no, this wasn't a radio program or anything. These were actually curriculum uh, choices that were made by many schools across the United States. And a lot of schools moved away from teaching phonics to starting readers and using these other
Uh,
approaches, despite the fact that many of them did not have the what was actually should have been. uh, the scientific rigor required by the government, but a lot of exceptions were made for many programs because they were programs created by large publishing companies that put a lot of
Mm,
money into them. And so they were able to influence the deciding bodies, managing managerial bodies to get their programs accepted, even though they didn't have the requisite proof. And now
right.
things are trending back the other way. And I wonder if
Mm.
the same kind of training that we've just been talking about might be a similar sort of thing that we need to be sure that the scientific rigor is a big part of this
In
process.
Japan, there's not. I don't believe there are systems and sections and divisions and parts where uh, teachers are doing the same thing. It seems as if everybody's got great autonomy.
Mm,
With this kind of like the idea of like, oh, we're giving you choice so you can choose the best thing, is like it's a bit of kind of like avoidance of trying to have like a set rule or anything like that. So I think Japan is going to be quite a long way away from any of that, which might be a good thing, or it usually ends up being a good thing. But it
I
slows the
don't
process.
know enough, right? I don't know enough to say whether that's true of every prefectural and every city level board of
Mm,
education.
it's very case by
I'm
case
not
by
really
case by
sure.
case.
Maybe if
Yeah,
some
yeah,
of our
yeah.
listeners out there have experience with that, you guys could send us a comment. Tell us about your own experiences. We'll have a link for that in our show notes. And please tell us how you feel about this. And if you've had an experience that is in any way related to this kind of autonomy at the local or prefectural level.
Right, right. So yeah, the negative experiences are probably great things for us to learn with. I think those same district leaders in the states were talking about experience with AI trainings where the people are left overwhelmed to try and streamline the training they offered, so address the teachers' immediate needs. So again,
Mm,
back to what we said, part one, we talked about play. So a suburban West Coast district introduced play sessions to alleviate the teachers' anxiety about AI. Before gradually moving on to more instruction-based learning, so
hmm
I think we could go down a large rabbit hole with it there. But one of the tools, and this is going to be my recommendation because I had a look at it and it looks really really good. Is one of the district leaders there introduced a tool called Magic School,
hmm,
which is different from Chat GPT. Um, and so this magical it shows teachers how to use them to plan sessions or generate like differentiated content, which is really really critical, especially in the lower school, because every class that I ever taught when I was in like middle and high school, like differentiation was like so really critically important. So Magic School, we'll put the links into the show notes
hmm.
for that. It's something that my eyes lit up when I saw it. It looked as if it can do like a whole wheen of stuff.
Let's talk about our recommendations for this month. I already recommended Cal Newport's podcast, but you have a book by Justin Reich that I think you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so Justin Reich or Reich's books, the power of doing less in schools. So he's quite prolific, I guess, in the states. He states that when the system isn't working and the people in the system are exhausted and overwhelmed, you can't fix those problems by adding more things to the system and making it more complicated, which is what I think Japan does a lot of. Like you have a new system which is supposed to replace the old system, and you end up with two systems running concurrently or more, and it
Mm.
becomes like just really spinning plates. Like when you should be focusing on just serving one dinner. So yeah, Justin Reek's book, it's worth a look. You can find it on Amazon as a digital or a paperback. It's quite quick
So,
to that.
addition by subtraction, right? Right there.
Yeah, so I mean, like for me, like when I'm lesson planning or if I'm trying to do anything, I'm always thinking like, how much can I cut out? How much can I cut it down before I lose the
Hmm
key thing that I really wanted to get? Which is why when hopefully my final product, when people see it, they think like, oh, this looks really easy. And saying like, yeah,
Mm.
but you know how difficult it was trimming it and cutting it down to just what is the thing that I was really wanting to teach and the thing that I really think is critical. So yeah, the power of doing less
Mm.
in
That is
schools.
so easy to forget, especially when you like the sound of your own voice as much as I do.
That's
All
it,
right.
right? The podcast cut.
It could be.
Just
It very well
yeah,
could be.
on the cutting room floor, right on the edit.
Hmm. All right. And do you have any tools that you'd like to recommend here, Brian, for
So
this
just
one?
back to that one that I mentioned before. So Magic School. So I'd recommend that people have a look at that. Of course, there's it's kind of freemium service as most things are. So you can teachers can do quite a lot on the free service. You can get students on there first. So I think probably, like we said before, let teachers play with it a bit and see what you can get from it. It's probably, I recommend, it's worth a good look. You know, take your time and see the kind of different things you can do with it.
Mm. And I would recommend once more Judy Wang and John Guyad's AI automated writing evaluation project, which is available for teachers to use with their students right now. It's narrowly focused, but it's very, very good. They have a paper out on it, and we also have the recording of the collaborative symposium, which we will also be making available to people if they want to see exactly how the automated writing evaluation project works. I've also put up a link to my own Help Me Improve My Diary Writing chatbot, which is very narrowly focused and probably not something that a lot of people could use. But take a look at it and uh, try to understand what it's doing with the students and how it is focusing their activities on just a couple of pieces of feedback, and have a try at making your own, because it's not incredibly time consuming or difficult, and you know your own context better than anybody else does, and you can make a chatbot that will be very useful for you and your students in your curriculum. That's what I
Yeah,
got.
start easy. So just I want a quick question. So I couldn't go to the symposium, so that
Hmm.
was at the end of March. But the symposium is something that's going to feature hopefully every year with JALTCALL going forward. Is that right?
That's exactly right, Brian. We are reviving the symposium, and JALCALL is aiming to do symposium next year live. But Louise Ohashi, who is the chair of Eurocall's AI SIG, and I had a great time working together on this collaborative online event. And Louise, as you know, is just absolutely fantastic to work with, and has a fantastic amount of influence in the AI in education community right now in Japan and in Europe. And so we have already promised each other that we're going to do the same thing again with more collaborative events. And we encourage everybody who's listening right now to please turn out, because we had a great time, and a lot of the people who came also have given us some excellent feedback so far.
And coming up, I guess in May, we're going to be at the Chiba Kanda University of International Studies Makahari for the JALTCALL Forum.
JALCALL Forum at Pansig, exactly. We have uh, four panelists, and let's see, Michael Hoffmeyer, the chair of this year's JALCALL conference, will be the moderator for the forum. Yep.
And Louisa Hashi is going to be on the forum. Gilbert Dizon, uh, Obari Sensei, Hiroyuki Obari, and Nikan Santevande.
Sadivandi. Okay. So we have four great panelists and Michael Hoffmeyer, our moderator, and that's going to be at 11:30 in the morning. Is that right, Brian?
Maybe have to check that time. I don't know if the schedule's not been
I
released
think so.
as
I'm pretty
yet, but yeah,
sure.
it's going to be on the Saturday morning. So that JALTCALL forum is just entitled "Applying AI in Language Education." So of course, everybody is welcome to come to that, whether you're a JALT caller or not.
And everybody
But
is also welcome to join us at the JALTCALL 2025 conference with the theme Call for All, July 18th to the 20th, Friday through Sunday. And please come and meet up with us in Tokyo. We are going to have a lot of excellent presentations, a lot of social events. Looking forward to seeing you guys there.
yeah. See you all there.
All right. Thanks very much, Brian. Later.
Bye, everybody.